First of all, Steve, what's your reaction to the news today from UEFA?
Well, obviously we're devastated. We're devastated for, most importantly, the supporters, and I think something the supporters of all clubs should be devastated for us, because this is the dream. You win a cup, actually win something for the first time in your history, and as somebody said to me, it's like winning the lottery and going to the counter and you don't get the prize. So I'm devastated for the players, for the fans, for the staff, and I think it's a bad day for football. I think most football fans, right-minded football fans, will see what an injustice, terrible injustice this is for the football club, and one that I dearly hope somebody can remedy, because I do believe that nobody in football wants to see this. Nobody in football, and I don't think UEFA want to see this. Clubs that rightfully qualify for a competition being locked out of that competition on the most ridiculous technicality that you could imagine.
Are you definitely going to appeal, and do you think you've got any chance of winning an appeal?
We will appeal. I don't want to prejudge that. Well, I say we'll appeal. I mean, we're looking at all of the options at the moment. That obviously is one option. I think what we would much prefer is if somebody intervened in this process. We believe it's possible for Mr. Schäferin or somebody to do that. I think there are a number of really important points that people need to consider. First of all, from what I can see, there's no other rule around the licence that has a deadline. There are people still resolving their issues now, as we know, people who have to put money into bank accounts by next week, and we'll have a test next week. So the date in itself seems an incongruous thing to do. Secondly, this is a rule we can't comply with. So a rule's been created that's impossible for Crystal Palace, the majority owners of Crystal Palace, to comply with. A minority shareholder needed to either sell or place their shares in trust. We had no power to compel them to do that. So that part alone is completely incongruous. How can you pass a rule and sanction a club for a rule they couldn't comply with? And then obviously, as everybody knows, John or anybody at Eagle Football didn't have decisive influence over Crystal Palace. Everybody knows this. Everybody knows we're not part of a multi-club. Everybody knows we have no staff, no players from Lyon, no loans, no transactions. I don't know anybody's phone number there before this process began. So I think everybody can see what a massive injustice this decision. We've caught a tripwire. We're caught up in a rule that wasn't put there for us, and it will change. Nobody's going to stick with this rule. It's a crazy rule. So I don't understand why the panel have come to the conclusion that they've come to. I think we proved to them beyond all reasonable doubt that John didn't have decisive influence over anything to do with the football club. And yet still they've come up with this decision, which seems incongruous, and I know Mr. Schäferin stood on a platform of supporting small clubs. We stood together almost with the Super League, because I wanted to maintain that dream. I didn't want a competition where clubs like us were locked out of it. And yet here we are. We've qualified rightfully, something that's incredibly difficult to do. The players and the staff and the manager managed to achieve, and the supporters achieved something incredible. We didn't steal that cup. We scored 13 goals, 1 against. We beat 3 teams above us in the Premier League, including one of the greatest teams that are playing today. And we don't get the prize. It's such an incredible travesty of justice, and I think something that every football fan should be worried about when teams with the same name have played in these competitions. Either you have these multi-clubs, or you ban them. They need to find a way through this. But notwithstanding that, we were never part of one. As everybody knows my position on them, I don't think that they're generally the right thing to do. Other people disagree with me, that's fine, but we have nothing to do with them. So, I think that there's a real crossroads here for UEFA to look at. Do they intervene and do the right thing, which is what I think they should do, which is what I think they want to do, or do they let this process play out and see probably one of the greatest injustices that have ever happened in European football?
To be clear, the Club Financial Control Body is an independent body. So what you're saying is that President Schäferin now has the power to intervene and overturn their decision. Have you reached out to him? Have you spoken to him about this at all?
No, I haven't personally spoken to him. I believe if it's right, there's always a way. There's always a way to overturn an injustice if there's a will. Maybe if we weren't Crystal Palace, maybe if we were a different club, we wouldn't have even got this far. I don't know. I think that there must be a way of getting to the right answer. I know Forest are a fantastic club. They won the league once, like us. They had a kind of black swan event. They got into what was called, the European Cup. Then they won it, and that enabled them to qualify again and win it again. These things, have an incredible effect on football teams. You get your one shot. This is our one shot at the Europa League in 164 years. I can't believe that a football club that storied, with that history, very similar to ours, would really want to be a part of taking this away from us. I really don't. A lot of Forest fans have reached out to me and said that they don't want to get access to a tournament this way. So, I genuinely feel that most right-minded football supporters will think that it's the right thing for us to be in the competition. We haven't, in fact, broken these rules, even if there are these bizarre indicators that indicate that somebody has control over two clubs, even when they don't. And I think UEFA should really see the light on this one and find a way to get us in.
Just want to be clear on John Textor's role at Crystal Palace, because this issue is all about the fact, does he have decisive influence at Crystal Palace? Does he have decisive influence? What kind of say does he have at the club?
Look, you only have to go back and look at all the things John said. I'm not asking you to look at the things he said recently. Look at the things he said before the 1st of March. The club was up for sale before the 1st of March, and now we've completed the sale. This is the thing that will be even more ridiculous to most football fans. Eagle football will be a million miles away from us by the time the tournament starts in September. We're nowhere near the tournament starting. What are the first principles of this rules? That there are no conflicts in the competition, that nobody can gerrymander results, that you can't artificially help one club or the other. Now, even so, there will be clubs in that competition who have helped each other get there. We haven't even done that. We have nothing to do with Lyon. And certainly by the time the competition's done, yesterday we received Premier League approval for the deal. The deal will complete sometimes over the weekend or Monday or Tuesday, I imagine. And that will be it. By the time we get to the competition, John won't have anything to do with Crystal Palace. He won't have anything to do with Lyon. Eagle football, in terms of an executive control, Eagle football will have nothing to do with Crystal Palace. I think people can see that that's pretty incongruous when in the competition there will be teams competing that are actually part of a multi-club, have leveraged being part of a multi-club to get into the competition. So this is the wrong decision, and I think most people would agree it is. And again, I would ask that somebody sees sense and we resolve it.
Can I just pick up on something you said there? So Woody Johnson buying John Textor's shares has now been approved by the Premier League. So within a matter of days, John Textor will have nothing to do with Crystal Palace anymore?
That's correct, yeah.
And when will that be officially announced?
Well, I think we just need to push the paper around, to complete the deal and all of those things. But it's 99.9999 recurring. I mean, it's 100% certain that will go ahead. So UEFA know that, it's a done deal. So by the time we get even to the draw of the competition, the two clubs will have absolutely nothing to do with each other.
And do you think that could potentially help you in the appeal? Because you can say to them, John Textor has nothing to do with Crystal Palace anymore. Okay, the issue wasn't sorted out by the March the 1st deadline, but looking ahead to the tournament, he's got nothing to do with us anymore.
Well, look, every possible thing that could have gone wrong for us up to now has gone wrong. So obviously I have a lot of trepidation about the CAS ruling. If you want to be a pedant about the date, I think the bigger argument we have is that John didn't have decisive influence, because he simply didn't. It's hard to prove a negative, but there are no decisions over which John has had even much influence. He would say himself. They asked me in the committee, does he have influence? I said, my 8-year-old son has influence over me. Somebody in the street who makes a suggestion to me has influence. So this is a ludicrous decision, and of course we'll be asking the court to see it our way and to go in our favour, but this is seriously disrupting, obviously, to our preparation as well. We're caught up in something that really has nothing to do with us, wasn't intended for us, is an arbitrary date, which I'm absolutely sure somehow will be changed next year. It's completely impractical when you think of the possibility of us winning the FA Cup back in March, and also just the nature of the way these things seem to operate. Apparently everything has to be sorted out by the 1st of March, except everything will be put on hold pending a decision of another club in July. So clearly, what is it that needs to be sorted out by the 1st of March? The licensing doesn't need to be sorted out by the 1st of March. The licensing is still going on now. What is the point of the rule? I don't even understand what the point of the rule is. But I can't stress enough, we can't comply with it. I don't understand how you can have a rule that people fall foul of, that clubs fall foul of, that supporters get caught up in, that players and staff don't get to compete in competition when you can't comply with the rule. It's impossible.
Have you spoken to Woody Johnson about this at all? And just for Palace fans watching this, can they sort of be assured that he is going to be, a good co-owner of the club going forward?
Yeah, Woody's a great guy, and he's a white knight, in many ways here. We asked him to accelerate things as much as he could, to expedite the process, because we were genuinely led to believe, that it would really make a difference. And the irony of ironies, it seems that it created liquidity for, the other club to get around some of their problems. Although, let me be clear, I want Lyon and Crystal Palace in the competition. I don't want Lyon relegated to the second division of French and we get some Pyrrhic victory. That's not what I want. I want Lyon to be in the competition, and I want us to play them, maybe, and have some fun doing it. So, Woody's a great guy, and he's come in at the 11th hour, and he's pushed, the envelope of what he wanted to do, and was very, very amenable and incredibly helpful in trying to get this done. I think it would have happened anyway, but he put his best foot forward, and it cost him money, to make it happen when it did. And I think, Palace fans should certainly, embrace that. We get on very well. Josh and David have been absolutely fantastic. Everybody flew to Switzerland. People put their best foot forward. The people involved in this club love this club. All the shareholders do. We've got a great shareholder group. Everybody says it when they come to games. This is a positive football club. We don't break rules. We haven't broken a financial rule. We're never in front of any committees for points deductions or, sanctions. There's lots of clubs that are in UEFA competition that apparently got fines because they broke the rules while they're in the competition. This is a completely disproportionate sanction, by the way. You can play in a competition, you can break the financial rules and you get a fine, and I agree with that. That's what should happen. I've got no problem with those clubs getting a fine, but we miss a date, we resolve the issue now, the issue's completely resolved, and we get terminated from the competition. The punishment doesn't fit the crime, does it, in any way, shape or form? And if you look at the various sanctions, there's no proportionality between the two whatsoever. So look, you can tell I'm very, very upset about it. I think it's a gross injustice. Other people may have a different point of view, but I think if they think about it in a fair-minded way, they won't.
Do you think you've been treated differently because you're Crystal Palace, and maybe you don't have the sort of European heritage of the big European clubs? You just mentioned there some of these clubs are being sort of let off with a slap on the wrist, whereas you are getting this big punishment. Do you think UEFA would treat a Barcelona or a Real Madrid like this?
I don't know. I don't. Of course, I think that probably they would have found a way. I do think this. I do think that we're not in UEFA's orbit. We're not. There isn't a group that represent clubs like us at UEFA. In 15 years, I've never had an email from UEFA, not one. They sent a notification of this rule change was coming to info@cpfc.co.uk, and they didn't. Nobody saw it, so they kept sending it again. And this was in January. Notwithstanding the fact, even if I'd have received it, what could I have done? I couldn't make somebody do it. They passed this rule after all of our shareholder agreements, so there was nothing we could do. What do I think? I think that they passed the rule to solve a problem that was caused by other clubs in other seasons, and we've just got inadvertently caught up in it, and maybe they're getting pressure from other clubs. We've been led to believe. I don't know. That's what we've been told. And for some reason, they can't seem to find a way out of it. And I think it's just dreadful for football. I really do. I think it's dreadful for football.
Have you had enough support from English football as a whole, or would you like more support?
Tremendous support. tremendous support. I mean, I've got almost as many texts as when we won at Wembley. People have been calling me, you've seen as I've arrived. Tremendous support from Forest fans, from pundits, from everybody in football. I don't think there's been a piece written that doesn't think that we should be in the competition. Not one piece written that I've seen that says, we deserve to not be in the competition. So incredible support from everybody. I thank each and every one of them. This is in the end. Look, it's not about me. People can like me, dislike me, whatever. That's their choice. I think they know that I love this football club. I think they know that I work tirelessly for the football club, as do a lot of people at the football club. And particularly the players and the manager and the supporters. Who shook Wembley. And it was beautiful. And it's really, really, really takes something away from what was an incredible story, I think, for everybody, for football, gave everybody a bit of hope and joy. I think it's really a really bad thing.
Have you spoken to the manager and the players about this? How do you think they'll be feeling today?
Well, look, whatever happens, we're a great group. They're a great group of players, and we will find a way through it, right? We will not buckle or give in. That's not what we do. That's not what this football club's about. But of course, everybody feels that it's a gross injustice. The manager's texting me. The manager knows the situation. He knows who runs the football club. He knows who makes the decisions. We make the decisions together. Me, Dougie Friedman, Oliver Glasner. We make the decisions at the football club, supported by Josh and David tremendously. We haven't had any help to get to this competition. They didn't have any help to win it. For them to be, for a player, imagine if you're a player, that's the one time in your life maybe you get to play in the Europa League. Maybe it's the only time. This might be a game-changing moment for Crystal Palace to play in the Europa League, maybe to win it, maybe to get to the Champions League. Can you imagine if we could do that? It isn't impossible. We've seen 2 English clubs get to the final this year. I would back this manager and this group to go deep in that competition. I really would, because they're a special group and a special manager. So, it's a double-edged sword. Of course, we're devastated. Everybody thinks it's an injustice, and it's terrible for those players, their careers, those supporters who won't get to enjoy something they may never get to enjoy again. In the end, we have to be strong and we have to find a way through it. Of course we do, and we will. But that's not until we've exhausted every single avenue to make sure that we get the right people to try and do the right thing.
How difficult has it been for you running the club this summer with so much uncertainty and the club being in limbo and not being able to tell the players, which competitions they're definitely going to be playing in next season? Other clubs may be looking at some of your players, you may be trying to sign players. Surely that's made it a really tough summer for you.
Well, the thing is, this has been all-consuming. We've got a huge legal bill. It's taken up far too much time and energy. The politics of football takes up far too much time and energy for everybody these days. It's so distracting and so unnecessary. I think. So yeah, it's been a big distraction. And look, if you're a Crystal Palace, unfortunately, you feel like you get used to these things. When we won the final, we were all so determined to win the final. The supporters were determined, the players were determined, because we wanted to break that narrative. We wanted to break that story of, glorious underdogs who fail at the last hurdle. We wanted to be the people that lifted the trophy. We wanted to be the people that won it for once. And then hot off the heels of that, we have 4 or 5 days where we can actually enjoy it. And then glaring in front of us is another injustice. We didn't want to look back on the final and say, and maybe for once in that final we have a bit of luck that we don't get in other finals, with maybe the sending off and, but there's so many games against clubs where the fortune hasn't gone our way, so we'll take it. But once again, we're in a situation where it looks like, as in 1991, when we qualified for Europe, fair and square, and then another club were reinstated at the last minute over the top of us. That it's going to happen to us again, and of course, you can't help feeling a little bit sorry for yourself, in a way that and I know that the two are not linked, and probably no one's picking on us, but you do wonder if we're being made an example of. I don't know. I don't know what's in people's minds. All I know is when Liverpool won the Champions League in 2004, was it, and the winners didn't go into the Champions League, and there was an outcry, UEFA found a way to fix it.
Have you spoken to UEFA about the fact that, for instance, Red Bull clubs playing the same competition, I think Man City, Girona, Ineos clubs, Nice, Man United playing the same competition, and yet you are being demoted?
Cavill, we've got so many points. I don't even know where to begin half the time. I mean, there's so much of an injustice to this, and we've been through just some of them. Of course we have, but we have to obviously work within the framework. They passed this rule about the 1st of March, so all of those things add up to a terrible injustice, don't they? I don't know what went on. I don't know why people were given more time. We're led to believe even the trusts that were put in place, people gave undertakings to put them in place before the 1st of March, but they weren't completed at the 1st of March. Unfortunately, those clubs haven't qualified for competition in a conflict. So they say to us, well, that hasn't been tested, so it doesn't matter that they finished late. But we feel that UEFA sanctioned them finishing late. So what's the difference between undertaking to put your shares in a blind trust before the 1st of March and then completing it after the 1st of March, and putting your shares up for sale before the 1st of March and completing it after the 1st of March, as long as it's before the competition? I mean, we really need to get back to first principles. There's no harm, no foul. Nobody will plan that competition connected to us where there's any link whatsoever. So I do think that somebody should just try and do the right thing, as they have done in the past. I don't know what the mechanism for that would be. I didn't swallow the rule book. I don't understand all the machinations of how these things work, but I think somebody can find a way if there's a will.
If I was a Hollywood scriptwriter, I would be thinking, there's this great injustice. You play in the Conference League, and the perfect ending would be that you win the Conference League final, like Chelsea won it last year. Would you still enjoy that achievement? Surely that would still be a big achievement for Crystal Palace as well, to win a European trophy.
Yeah, of course, but look, it isn't. I'm not denigrating that competition. It's a great competition, and of course, at least those supporters that have got their travel books out and their flight plans and all of the things that would be exciting and different about the season, maybe they can still get to enjoy that bit. But I don't feel that we should go away with our head patted and a consolation prize and just accept it. There's a reason that the competition attracts more money. It used to be called the Cup Winners' Cup, if you remember. This is the other thing as well about the rule that they should look at. How obviously, generally, a Lyon are going to finish above us in their league than we're going to finish in our league. Generally, you would think that, right? So you're favouring bigger clubs, really, in the way that rule's written. How is winning a cup not better than finishing 6th in your domestic league? It's just crazy. It's just not thought through, the rule. And I think somebody needs to think that. It wasn't a thought through rule. We made a mistake. We made an error. Let's make this a test year. And yes, you sold the shares, and no harm, no foul. Let's move on. I can't believe, in my opinion, that any other club would really want to fight that decision or be seen to fight that decision.
Financially, what does it mean for Palace? Because I think Chelsea winning the Conference League last year was worth 22 million euros, whereas Spurs winning the Europa League was worth twice as much.
Yeah, I think the early stage is about half. It's about half, and
so you'll be about 20 million euros worse off.
It depends where you finish. I mean, you've got us winning both, which is nice of you, But if you get through, in the top 16, I think, you're talking about a difference of about half. If you're taking gate receipts and all that into account, I think probably, I don't know this is true, but maybe there's a bit more travel in the Conference League, sometimes a bit further flung. And obviously you've got the same compounded effects on your Premier League performances, right? So you're still playing on a Thursday, you still got to get up for playing on a Sunday. So look, again, the Conference League is a great competition, but I don't think that should be accepted in any way, shape or form as fair compensation for what is rightfully ours.
Is there anything Palace fans can do in the meantime? I know a lot of Palace fans who've been suffering this summer. What would be your message to them?
Well, look, I think, obviously this is where I think the size of the club probably does have an impact. When Liverpool weren't in, as winners, they didn't get to participate. There was massive pressure put on UEFA. So, of course, football fans should make their feelings known in a peaceful, respectful way. As our fans always are. I don't think they should do anything precipitous or I wouldn't call on them to do anything like that. But there's email addresses I'm sure they can write to and make their feelings known. But I think UEFA understand that, you know. And look, we're not a Liverpool or Man United, but we've got a big fan base, you know, and I think we're a club that, you know, aren't disliked by many. I think that, you know, maybe, and I don't know, if the Conference League, you know, is an alternative, maybe somebody's done the right thing there as well. You know, maybe there's another club, you know, who might have sought to take advantage, you know, who haven't. And if they haven't, you know, huge respect to them for doing that. Because I honestly believe I wouldn't want to do it. I wouldn't want to get into the competition this way. So, yeah, of course the fans should make their feelings known. And I think maybe fans of all clubs, because it could be you, right? It could be you.